And welcome back one final time. Well, as you travel in this state, you might notice not all of our roads and bridges are quite up to snuff. While potholes and cracks are annoying, a new report out today from Lieutenant Governor Richard Ravitch suggests that those surface issues are actually the least of our worries. Lieutenant Governor Ravitch warns that the lack of spending on New York's transportation infrastructure is reaching the danger zone, and the state has, quote, no credible strategy to address the looming crisis. In fact, he says billions of dollars a year are needed just to maintain the aging system, and that is to say nothing of funding new projects. Now, given the state's fiscal problems, there are no simple solutions, as the state budget director made clear earlier today.
I wouldn't say that the only option is to increase taxes. I think there might be some other ways to try to focus our, capital program to make sure that we're doing the things that absolutely need to get done.
Well, the Lieutenant Governor is joining me now to discuss his report. Mr. Ravitch, thank you as always for joining us.
My pleasure.
So you seem to have set up a fairly daunting situation. Every time I talk to you, you have these reports that just make me frightened for the future of the state. You say basically that New York has a choice before we get started. It's either raise taxes and fees or maybe tolls, or don't invest in the infrastructure, which sets up actually a public safety hazard.
Well, I put it a little differently. I said we do have a choice. We have to raise revenues if we want to engage in more long-term capital investments, or we have to shrink. We have to recognize the fact that we don't have the resources, and we have to accommodate our planning to recognize not only can we not expand our system to meet the challenges of economic growth and population increase, but we're actually going to have to consider what we're going to do with less facilities. Right now, the MTA doesn't have the money to fund the balance of their first phase of Second Avenue subway or East Side Access. Right now, there's not enough money left in or coming into the Highway Trust Fund to support any additional capital borrowing without a significant transfer from the general fund.
Okay, but here's the problem. You can't actually shrink the existing infrastructure. You have to take care of the infrastructure, or we see what happened with the Crown Point Bridge, for example, which you sort of bring up as an example of what not to do, an exhibit A of what not to do, which is to say this bridge is dangerous and you just let it go until it becomes so dangerous that you have to blow it up, and that's expensive.
Well, first of all, the Department of Transportation, a great bunch of engineers, they're doing everything they can to maintain safety, and I'm not suggesting that anything is unsafe, but I'm suggesting that we have 17,000 bridges in this state, and the cost of maintaining them in a state of good repair is increasing every year. And the rate of increase, compared to the rate of increase of existing revenues, it doesn't augur well for our future. And to the extent that we use all of the revenues that are paid into the Highway Trust Fund to maintain a state of good repair, then we have no revenue to service any new debt for any capital investments.
Okay, and New York is already carrying actually a fair amount of debt. In fact, not just for transportation, but a historic amount of debt comparative to other states in the nation. But we've talked to a number of people now, and you tried to put forth a program for bailing out the MTA that included tolling the East River bridges down in New York. Now you suggest a regional approach to tolling. Don't you think that state lawmakers are going to reject that, just like they rejected tolls for the bailout?
I'm simply saying they have tough choices, and they're responsible for all the consequences of what they do, not just the ones they intend.
What about
I think the public has to recognize the fact. The elected representatives reflect, hopefully, what the public wants. The public has to understand, and that's what those of you in the media do, is to make sure the public understands they have very tough, unpleasant choices.
Well, what about this idea then that's been floated by people like, say, Senator Libous from out in the Binghamton area, that we could privatize some of these assets, to sell them off to private companies and have those private companies run them and keep the revenue stream after giving us a lump sum?
Well, there are two kinds of privatization. One is to transfer an asset, sell it to a private operator, a bridge or a road, and let them charge whatever the tolls or fares are necessary to service the capital that they invest in it. That is a true privatization. The only problem with that is that nobody can protect the public, the amount of money that the public pays to use those facilities. The other kind of privatization or sale of assets is the kind that we in other states have done for years, is to sell an asset and then lease it back. And that is fooling people, because all that does is say that future generations are going to have to pay for the benefit that this generation got out of this operating budget. So if you sell an asset and then lease it back, that's just kicking the can forward.
Okay, so this is something actually, you had a report that talked about Medicaid reform. Now you've got a report about transportation infrastructure. It just seems to be that the problems that are facing Andrew Cuomo, the incoming governor, are mounting ever higher. Have you discussed this with him at all, or do you think that he should prioritize transportation over Medicaid or Medicaid over education? I mean, where to start?
No. Liz, I said last March when I proposed the plan to how to get to budget balance that the fastest growing expenditure in the state was Medicaid, and the kind of expenditure that was suffering the most was our infrastructure. And that's why I've devoted time in the last 2 months to prepare the information that hopefully will help people understand what the choices are. I have suggested ways of reducing the rate of growth of Medicaid. There's no magic formula to maintaining our infrastructure in a state of good repair, or let alone building new facilities, other than providing revenues. And whether we use the general revenues of the state or whether we enact special revenues to finance transportation, which is what my personal recommendation would be, that's up to the new governor and the new legislature. And I'm sure Governor Cuomo is wrestling with this and a lot of other problems at the moment. He's got very tough choices, a very tough environment, and we'll find out what he's concluded when he submits a budget.
Well, I
think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to press him to say in advance, because I'm sure he's working very hard to try to figure it out.
On many different levels and on many different issues. I want to thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor Ravitch, for joining us this evening, although the news is not so uplifting.
Thank you, Liz.